You know, times are pretty weird right now. For a long time, the announcement of a Pixar movie has usually come with the expectation that it will be, at the very least, good. Not just in the past, but even during the 2010s. People would either respond to these announcements with hype or just mild excitement, even if the movies might not be that great. But I gotta say, out of all of the original stories told from this studio, I don't think the public has rejected the launch of any one of them so instantly like they did with Elemental. From the moment of this movie's announcement till now, it was mired in nothing but caution and cynicism. And I can blame that on the fact that the marketing of this movie was fucking dog shit. The trailers and clips were all front-loaded with some of the worst parts of the movie, and it hid most of the strengths of it. That, and the fact that the premise wasn't that original, and it was directed by Peter Sohn, whose last movie for Pixar was already mired in controversy, made it feel like the public was begging for this movie to fail. I also think that showing this movie as the last film at Cannes Film Festival was frankly a terrible idea, as that opened the movie up with bad publicity because it immediately followed genuinely emotional masterpieces. But anyway, now that this marketing nightmare is over and the film is finally out, the big question is this movie any good? Now, for context, I marathoned every single Pixar movie earlier this year, so I was fully expecting this movie, based on the trailers, to be decent at best and kinda garbage at worst. But I'm really shocked to report this. Elemental was a genuinely fun movie that I'd maybe watch again? Seriously, I hope you know how genuinely surprised I am that this movie was any good. Let's start with the obvious pros, which was its visuals. I think Element City wasn't shown nearly well enough, and the different variety of locations, character designs, and effects all look really good. I think that there are moments in this movie that I found pretty visually striking. I also think the score, composed by Thomas Newman, fucking slapped. It was one of the best things about the movie, and probably a top 5 score for this studio. I also think that the relationship formed by Ember and Wade was really nice. While we mostly focused more on Ember's family struggles, and I kinda hoped for more out of Wade, I think that the way Wade helps her change her worldview and push her to accomplish her own dreams is really wholesome. I also just found Ember to be a really fun character throughout the movie, and the struggles that she faced with her identity was also handled pretty well. The side characters were kinda mixed, but none of them were too awful. Even Claude, who was kind of annoying and easily the worst character in the movie, was only shown in 2 scenes before the very end and did practically nothing throughout the story, so I didn't really mind him that much. But what definitely helped this movie was that I liked practically all of the vocal performances, especially out of Ember. But that's kind of also tied to one of the problems with this movie, which is that it's not that funny. There are definitely a few cringe lines here and there, but it's never outright obnoxious. It was mostly just comedic white noise. Though I do think that there were a pretty good bit when Ember met Wade's parents and how subtly racist they were. It kind of reminded me of the dinner scene from If You Can Believe Me, Get Out. Get out! It was kinda good. I liked it. The movie's story is, on a structural level, kinda predictable. It's never really boring, but it's not like there were too many genuine surprises. I think that the story for this movie has some things going for it, mostly with how it handles stuff about immigration, and it clearly comes from Peter Sohn's personal experiences, and how they tie that in with the story of Ember. but on a story level, this mostly focuses on the step-by-step interactions between Wade and Ember more than any actual deep storytelling. But yeah, that's not the only problem with this movie, and in order to bring up the rest of them, I'll have to talk about the ending, so skip to this time frame if you don't want to hear about it. 3, 2, 1. So there's two that I'd like to discuss here. The first is in regards to the quote-unquote threat of the movie, which is that there's a huge leak going on in the city, which is causing water to flood into Firetown, which is a huge problem and may cause Ember's shop to shut down. They find a couple of short-term solutions, but they never actually explained how it got there, how many in Element City there are, or what exactly happened to it by the end. And that's kind of the other big problem with the movie. Its ending. Now, before I say anything, the actual conclusion they reach to in this movie is good. That's not the problem. The problem is how we got to that point. So, after a genuinely wonderful sequence where the two actually touch and hold each other, the two of them begin to argue because Ember doesn't think she deserves what she wants. This kinda comes out of fucking nowhere, and the scene where they leave isn't exactly great, but at least that's all, right? No, because they have another split-up scene directly after that because Wade crashes her father's retirement party. The two of them fight, and it sets off both Wade and her father, and now we're back to the exact same place we were 2 minutes ago.
Oh my god, I don't fucking care.
I'm not sure why there needed to be two of these breakup scenes. And then the ending, where the dam breaks and floods Firetown, is a little weird. Like, the action is okay, and I'm fine with what's going on, but it does this thing that I fucking hate in animated films, where they have this dramatic fake-out death, and they try to trick the audience into thinking that it's actually legitimate, and then it just isn't. And the way they bring him back in this movie particularly is kinda stupid. I guess you could assume that the steam in the air is still him, and since the top dam never actually opened, he was actually able to cry to form himself as water again? But if that's the case, then the movie did a pretty shit job explaining this, and I think the movie would have benefited from him either not fake dying at all, or him just actually dying. This just feels like a very generic third act, even if the actual conclusion was pretty nice. And that's kind of the takeaway I come out with Elemental. It was good, it was a nice wholesome movie. I think that it was kinda similar to Luca from 2021. And I'm kinda liking these new low-key stories being told by Pixar, even if this one comes with a few more problems than normal. Pixar tends to buckle under the weight of their own ambition, but I just think that this is a sweet, wholesome, pretty looking and sounding movie that has some genuinely great sequences, but also could have used a more original story. I think for now, a 7 out of 10 is a good score for it, but it might change up or down based on rewatch. It does kinda suck that the inevitable financial failure of this movie is shoving Pixar into another era of sequel bait, and I really hope that Elio gives the studio the critical and commercial success they need in order to keep telling the original stories that make up the foundation of their library. There is a huge argument about whether Pixar is falling off or not, but I think they're doing much better at this point in this decade than this point last decade, with 3 genuinely good movies and one that I definitely respected even if I wasn't a huge fan of it. The one movie that I genuinely didn't like is the one that they'll likely be shepherded into making if these movies continue to flop. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is Nimona is releasing in 2 weeks. Let's fucking go!